All right, I'm joined today by Donna Stewart from Lost Irish. Donna, thank you for jumping on here with me today.
I am buzzing to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, so tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me, how did you get into whiskey in general before this new endeavor?
Oh, it's a long path, so I'm going to try make it a short story. But ultimately, I'm from Dublin. I was actually born in Boston, so my parents lived in Boston for about 8 or 9 years. With like their whole family moved there in the 80s, and they brought me back when I was two. So I was raised in Dublin and went to school there, went to university there. But I always had these stories of America. And I had been visiting America when I was younger in summer vacations. My friends in Ireland would go to Spain or Portugal, but I would go to America, which is, something that like people couldn't comprehend because America's, so far away. And I would go to Boston, I would go to Connecticut, I would go to Florida, all the East Coast. And I had uncles and aunts and my mom's cousins and stuff that stayed there. So, anyways, I finished university and I go, well, I've got a blue passport. I'm an American citizen. Like, I want to go to America. So I came over here, originally started in New Jersey, worked and lived with my uncle, went up to Boston for a stint. And then I just wanted to see the West Coast. I'd never been West in the States. So I came over to California for a 3-week holiday. The plan was I'm going to go down to San Diego. I'm going to maybe like take a drive up to San Francisco. I'm just going to see California. And within 5 days, I walked into a British bar in Santa Monica called the King's Head, and I was offered a job on the spot. And I said, you know what? I was here for vacation, but I think I'm going to stay.
Wow.
So I've actually been in California now for 11 years. And that job is where I got my first true introduction to Irish whiskey. So I was a waitress working there, and the bartenders one night, we were off work, and they said, come on, let's do a shot. And they poured me a shot of Jameson. And I said, oh, no, 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 I don't drink whiskey. Remember, I'm only 21. I was probably at the time drinking a lot of fruity drinks in Ireland. And I go, no, I don't drink whiskey. And they go, you're Irish. You drink whiskey. So they handed me the shot. And of course, I had to do it. I couldn't say no. And I did it. And that started a long love with Irish whiskey. So went on from that restaurant to become a bartender in 2 other Irish bars in the city. And one of my favorite things to do when I had the time is if a customer came in and they sat down and they ordered, a Jack Daniels or a Jameson or even a beer, I'd go, we just got a new Irish whiskey in. Do you want to try it? And often they would say yes, because I think that they had a lot of faith in me because I had an Irish accent. I didn't necessarily have the wisdom of Irish whiskey, but I could have a chat with them and say, come on, we'll taste it together. And because it was an Irish bar, we were seeing a lot of cool different brands come in all the time. So ended up falling in love with a lot of different Irish whiskeys and falling in love with Irish whiskey and starting to read up on the stories, starting to learn about, where each one came from, what was different about them, and why they tasted so different. And, what did we love about it? We would talk, me and my customers. And then eventually one of my coworkers, James, he's from Kilkenny, he said to me, there's a job going at Tullamore Dew. It is the best job in the world. You have to go for it. So I called up the contact that I knew who worked for William Grant. She had previously been the Tullamore Dew ambassador. And I asked her, what's this job, ambassador? Like, I'd never heard of it. And here's my experience. I had worked in corporate events for many years. I had a marketing degree, but I had spent all this time working in bars on the side and like loving that part of my life. And she was like, yeah, that's kind of what we're looking for. So I applied, and after a long set of interviews, I ended up getting the role of the Tullamore Dew West Ambassador. So I covered the West of the States. And at that point, I had a early, like 101 whiskey knowledge, but I knew what it took to sell whiskey, which was really like stories and just like kind of having fun and learning a little bit here and there. And then with that role was when I really got my deep dive and got to learn like the intricate like details of distillation and maturation and how that affects a whiskey. And absolutely adored the role. Represented an iconic brand, the second biggest Irish whiskey in the world. Doesn't get much better than that. And I was lucky enough at the time to be kind of mentored by my coworker, Tim Hurley. He was the national ambassador for Tullamore Dew. So I was West. We had a coworker, Gillian Murphy, who's East, and then we had Tim Hurley, who's national. So Tim taught me a lot about the role, taught me almost all the things I know about whiskey. And Tim decided to leave Tullamore Dew after 10 years and start his own brand. And when he left, I was devastated, couldn't believe it. I didn't know what he was going to go do. It was all top secret. And finally, he came to me about a year later and said, I have an opportunity. I have a new whiskey. It's coming. And I want you to come work for us. And that's kind of how I landed where I am right now.
How hard was it for you to decide to leave Tullamore Dew? Because like you said, it's the second biggest Irish whiskey company out there. And so you're leaving a well-established, well-known brand for something brand new.
Honestly, it was so difficult. Like probably one of the hardest decisions I've ever made in my life. Because on one hand, I had full faith in Tim and I knew that it was going to be something exceptional. He taught me all of that I knew. So I was like, there's no doubt like this is going to be amazing. And I already knew we worked exceptionally together. But on the other hand, like I adore Tullamore Dew. Like I love my job. I love my coworkers. I had just, after 3 years, you've kind of got the job down. You start to, be able to make decisions yourself and understand like, how to affect change and do really cool events and where the brand is going. And I kind of didn't really see myself working for any other brand. I just adored it. Like Tullamore Dew was part of me. But, I think when an opportunity to be part of a brand new Irish whiskey comes your way, you kind of look around and go, this will never happen to me again. So sure. I have to do it. And to be honest, it was a lot of sleepless nights. Took me a really long time to make the decision. But it was ultimately tasting the liquid and hearing about the brand that was what sold me. I just couldn't have been more excited, and I couldn't think of anything that described me better than this whiskey and that fit my lifestyle better. So I had to do it. I think it was scary, but I did it.
How important was like your bar background in getting in with Tullamore Dew? Like, is that something that you found helpful, whether it's just being in the industry or like having conversations with customers? Like, is that something that you felt was beneficial for you moving into an ambassador type of a role?
100%. I actually, if I'm going to be honest, like my bartending gig was something that I did because it helped me make friends in LA. It was so much fun. I enjoyed it every day and it was great money. So I always did it on the side of whatever else I was doing, which was often like a marketing kind of production role. And, but I just didn't think that it was going to lead me in my career. And when I ended up getting the job, I realized how much of an asset it was to have been a bartender. In one way, to like have the knowledge of like working behind the bar and, how cocktails should be made and how customers need to be served. But in another hand, like how to talk to people. Like being a bartender is you have to talk to every type of person for, hours sometimes of the day, understand the different nuances of those people and what they might want to talk about. And it just taught me about hospitality. Being an Irish pub is about making people feel at home. And so we always we knew in my pub that I worked in, like the final job was called the Irish Times. We know everybody's name. We know everybody's drink. I know their story. They come in and I go, how was the party last weekend? Like, did it go good? Or, when's the baby coming? Or whatever is going on in their life, like I follow. So it was a community. And I think that taught me a lot about then becoming an ambassador because it's about relationships. And it's about building partnerships, talking to people. cold talking to people, walking into a bar and just being able to strike up a conversation. But also having that knowledge of like, you know, what makes good drinks, how does a bartender work under pressure, when to talk to bartenders, when to know to leave them alone. So yeah, it was a really big asset, I think, in becoming an ambassador, if not the most important role that could help me in this role.
Now, am I allowed to take a sip of this right now, or do I have to wait till we get there?
You
I'll
can
wait.
take a sip of it if you want. It's up to you.
It's sitting in
I
front
mean,
of
or
me.
we can go straight there if you want.
No, we can't. We gotta get to the we gotta go through the steps. I feel wrong about that. Sorry. So okay, so obviously Tullamore being a massive brand, you know, you take the leap and leave and go to Lost Irish. How was that transition? What was that like? Because I know we first connected, it was probably last summer. Um, what is that transition like? You've got a new brand. I mean, it's starting from the ground up. How does that process get started in terms of like starting to get the name out before there's even a product out? What is that experience like for you?
So honestly, this was another reason that made me jump to this brand, is like, I knew I was going to learn a ton. I really didn't know what I was walking into, but I knew I was going to learn so much about what it takes to launch a new brand. And we really had to sit, like, there was lots of times where me and Tim and Jack sat down and go, Jack's our coworker in Texas. And we were like, how are we going to start this? You know, what do we want our first introduction of Lost to be? So what we decided to do was to kind of introduce it on social media, because the first people that we want to know about Lost Irish was the trade, the bartenders, bar owners, everybody who's in the Irish whiskey kind of industry and the liquor industry. So we were like, let's just start to drip it out with the expectation that the whiskey was coming like early last year. Like, we were hoping for April. We were kind of accepting it was going to be June, but it actually ended up not getting here till December. So we hit every supply chain issue that you can think of. Obviously we're in a pandemic, so that didn't help. But you know, glass was a huge factor. That's a custom bottle, and the glass was so difficult for us to get enough of and get it on time, and everything was delayed. And then shipments were delayed, the corks were delayed, like everything, every element of starting this product was delayed. And in the meantime, we had to keep people excited about it. So it was a challenge. And we, you know, we just worked as a team. We kept talking about it. We kept going. I cover California, so I tried my best to keep visiting different bars in California, keep showing them that I'm here, even though I have no brand to show them. Yeah, I don't even have a bottle to show them or liquid to taste them on, but to keep them excited and say, it's coming, I swear, like, when it gets here, you're going to be the first to try it. But it was difficult, but it was interesting. And to be honest, everybody was excited. So it was an exciting time, but nothing more exciting than when it finally arrived, to be honest.
That's got to be incredible, especially after getting everything kind of pushed off and then it's finally there. So talk about the brand, because it's very unique. Talk about because I'm reading through the side of this label, but yeah, I want you to kind of talk about just the whole idea behind Lost Irish. This is a cool looking bottle, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, we're so proud of the bottle. The thing about that is, like, if you want to make an iconic brand, you have to make an iconic bottle. So it's very, very important that that bottle was perfect, which, by the way, was part of the delays, you know, little tiny nuances on the bottle that we would have to change the custom mold. But okay, so Lost Irish. So the concept behind Lost Irish is it's born in Ireland and it's lost in the world. So it is all three styles of Irish whiskey that we make in Ireland, but it is finished in casks from each of the 6 continents to represent the wandering Irish spirit. So there are 5 million people in Ireland who are Irish, and there are 70 million people who claim Irish heritage in the world.
Goodness.
The Irish culture is one of travel. So, like, you know, even an example is me. So, like, my parents in the 80s, when there wasn't work in Ireland, went to America. And before them, my great grandfather went through Ellis Island and fought in the war for America. America has always been a great place for the Irish to come, but they've also made it to lots of different parts of the world for many different reasons, whether it was for poverty to look for a better life, or they were sent as prisoners or slaves, or, you know, they followed their families over who had set up, you know, a business that they could come work at, or a home that they could come live at, and were giving them opportunities. So I remember when I was leaving college, you know, they didn't say to me, where are you going to go work? They said, where are you going to go? You know, my friends and my family. And I said, I'm going to America, you know? So, and my other friends said, I'm going to Canada. I'm going to Australia. I'm going to go to London. I'm moving to France. And it genuinely is a part of our culture. And a lot of those friends who I grew up with and who left have either stayed away for 5 years, 2 years, and they took a little bit of that culture, a little bit of what they learned, and they went back to Ireland with it and brought it home, or they stayed abroad and they brought their Irish culture with them. You know, like I came and worked in Irish bars. I have friends who started the local Irish GAA team in LA. You know, like it's about bringing a little bit of home with you, or bringing a little bit of something different home. So it genuinely is a part of our culture. So we wanted to make a whiskey that represented the contemporary Irish person. And the contemporary Irish person is well-traveled, lives for experiences, is maybe not necessarily from Ireland, you know, but has a little bit of Irish culture or a love for Ireland. So that's why we called it Lost Irish, because it's not about being lost in a scattered state of mind. It's about like, get lost, stay lost. The world is a more interesting place if we travel, adventure, meet new people. And what better to do it with a whiskey in your hand?
That's awesome. I mean, what it sounds from, like, just from that, I mean, it sounds like it's a very authentic, and it's very representative of Ireland and Irish culture. It's not just a ploy. It's not just a gimmicky type thing. Like, it's a very real thing of, that's how the culture is. And like, as you talk about the Irish pub, like, I've been in Irish pubs, it's a very real thing. Like, that's just how people are. And that's so cool that it's as authentic as it is, for like trying to bottle that concept, literally into a bottle.
Yeah. And, you know, like you just brought up the Irish pub, and it was like, that was a huge factor, I think, of what inspired Tim to create this brand. And he created this brand with his friend, Neil Sands. And the two of them, they grew up in Ireland in County Louth, but they both had been extremely well-traveled. And Tim with Irish whiskey, Neil with being an entrepreneur and doing lots of different business ventures. And they both kind of had met each other along the way in different countries in the world. But the one thing Tim was exceptionally passionate about throughout his whole career is the Irish pub. So he actually wrote a book called From Barley to Blarney on the 50 best pubs in Ireland. And like, the process of finding out like what those 50 pubs are was intense. Like, he went to almost every pub in Ireland, and, you know, they looked at all the factors of what make an Irish pub, and then they chose the 50 best ones, kind of delineating based on the county. But Tim would go everywhere in the world. He would go to, like, you know, the corners of Colombia and find an Irish pub. There's like a pub on the top of a mountain in Alaska, you know, like the Irish pub can be found in every town, in every city, in every country in the world. And if that's not an example of how lost the Irish culture, you know, has gotten, you know, bring our culture to the world. And by the way, I think as regular consumers, if we go anywhere in the world and we see an Irish pub, we're probably going in for a pint, because we know it's going to be welcoming. There's probably going to be people in there to have a chat to. They're probably going to have some good Irish whiskeys, and they're probably going to have a nice pint of Guinness. So, I mean, I've been in an Irish pub on Gilly Tea in Bali. You know, like, it's mad the places that they exist. So that the Irish pub was a huge inspiration as well for Lost Irish come to life.
Yeah, it's true. It's a real thing. Like, I think everywhere anybody's been, you can see an Irish pub.
Yeah.
And it's going to be their own version of it in some way, but it's always going to go back to, trying to replicate what you would find in Ireland.
Yeah.
And some probably get closer than others, but you're right. Like
Yeah.
you're going to go in and, the people that are going to be in there and they're going to be down to chat with you and hang out. And I need to know if the confession box in Dublin is on that list, because that's the best pint of Guinness that I've ever had.
I don't think that it is actually. I'll make sure to get you a book. I have one over here, but I don't think he's named the confession box in Dublin. Um,
That was my
but
favorite.
but the thing is, like, every pub in Ireland is an Irish pub. So
True.
it's a
It's just
very big challenge to get it down to 50. And he says, like, there was heated debates.
I bet.
There was arguments where they stormed out. There was sleepless nights of coming down to this list. And it by no means is inclusive of how many I mean, I open the book and I go, why is this not in there?
Yeah.
So everybody has their arguments, which I think is what makes it fun. But you went to Dublin, you went to Galway, right? Where else
Yeah.
did you go on it?
Did Dublin, Galway, stopped in Tullamore. Went down to Kilkenny.
Right. Oh, Kilkenny.
Yeah, it was really cool. I was actually really surprised by it. But
what was your favorite pub overall? Was it the confession box?
yeah, because you know what, we really, okay. So the first time we went, we were actually in a really cool little spot having dinner. I just wanted like a dude on a guitar singing, and that's all I wanted. And so we had asked a guy that we were with, or somebody that with where we should go, and he gave us the name of some like little Irish pub, and it was a bunch of house music and fist bumping, and it just wasn't for me. And we bounced after about 2 minutes. That's not what we wanted, so we wound up somewhere else, and just it was fine. But going to Ayr Square in Galway, I think was, like, for me, that was way more, a little bit more real. Because you can get lost. Yeah, you can get lost around like Temple Bar area, and it's I don't want to go hang out with a bunch of Americans if I'm in Dublin. So right. It was getting out to Galway was definitely my favorite spot for sure.
Oh, I absolutely adore Galway. It's so charming. There's so many pubs on that one street. And they're really good. But like, that's the thing, I'm from Dublin. I absolutely love Dublin, but a lot of people think, if I go to Dublin, I've gone to Ireland. You have to get in a car and go around Ireland to say you've truly been to Ireland. Sure. Because you can go to a city in any part of the world, and Dublin City is a very cool and fun city. But I mean, you have to go to all these charming little towns, and you have to sit in a dark pub with only like 2 other people at the bar, and then some fella starts singing, and then you go, okay, I've done Ireland.
It's very different. Like even taking the train across. So there's a Dropkick Murphys song, Field of Athenry. And yes. We pull up at a train stop, and you're in Athenry. And it's like, whoa, that's kind of cool. Like, I like that. We're sitting in a pub in Galway, and they start singing Galway Girl. And it's like, okay, like that's really cool.
Yeah.
They had the Christmas market there. That was an absolute blast. And I've never, we still, my buddies and I still joke to this day, we've never seen so many people be completely uninterested in the music or anything that's going on until they played Fairy Tale of New York at the very end, and then the place erupted, and it was awesome. I've never seen it.
So Fairy Tale New York is an anthem in Ireland. So when it's Christmas time, it's funny because it's not really like played that much here. And I often show a lot of my American friends, like I'm like, what's your favorite Christmas song? They give me some answer, and I'm like, Fairy Tale New York. Like there's no argument. But we have like kind of a tradition over Christmas time in Ireland. Every single bar, pub, club, doesn't matter what kind of like space you're in, for those like 2.5 weeks of Christmas, the last song of the night is always Fairy Tale in New York.
But everybody was sitting around on these little, like, they look like park benches, and right. People are just hanging out, chatting, and all of a sudden Fairy Tale of New York comes on, and everybody got up, and it was crazy. I've never seen anything like it. And you're singing and stomping your feet. Oh, it was a blast. I absolutely loved it.
Oh, I love that. I love like to hear people's experiences of going to Ireland and having the best time. Like I do a lot of, like, obviously being here for 11 years, like a lot of people ask me all the time, like, I want to go to Ireland. And I go, well, then you have to go. And they go, where should I go? And I go, you text me when you're booking it and I'll tell you where to go. So I've like happily curated a lot of people's trips. And as a result of doing that, people would tell me like, oh, I've been to Ireland, I've kissed the Blarney Stone, or I've been to Ireland, I've been to the Cliffs of Moher. So I started every single time I go home now, I go to something else. So I like, obviously I want to go to Dublin and see my family and hang out and all that. But I'm always like, okay, I want to go to Belfast. I want to do the Wild Atlantic Way drive. I want to do the Ring of Kerry. I want to go kiss the Blarney Stone. So I've been making it my goal to always go and experience the different parts of Ireland. So then I can tell people, so go kiss the Blarney Stone, then go around the corner and there's a little pub. Go in there, you have to have this stew, you know, and just trying to curate like this great experience. But I mean, everybody who goes loves it. It's great.
It's like, I like Dublin a lot. I thought it was very pretty. It's just such a pretty, like, as you're taking the bus in from the airport, you know, and you're driving like along the river, like there's something really cool about it. And especially like the first time you go, and you kind of have this idea of like Ireland, you know, there is like a mystique about it because it's popular. And you think about Irish pubs, like you said, they're everywhere. There's just this idea of what it's going to be like. And again, going back to like the whiskey, everyone's had Jameson. Everyone thinks they like Guinness, you know, once a year. And it turns out like we had heard it was very different there, and it's completely different drinking it in Ireland than it is drinking it here. But there's just something about it. But you're right. Like, I would love to go see Belfast. I didn't make it up there with my buddies that went up that way.
I love Belfast.
I'd love to go see Cork and just all sorts of different areas. I think would be a blast.
You'll go back?
I will. Definitely.
100%.
All right.
So I know you're salivating.
Seriously.
I'm so thirsty.
I waited like 4 days with this sealed and didn't open it, which is an amazing accomplishment in itself. But I want to hear about the whiskey. So the concept is great. And again, like I'm looking at the side, it's got 6 continents and it's got the different casks there, you know, the Japanese oak, sherry cask, the bourbon cask. So all these are going into kind of the whiskey, right? So tell me a little bit more about the whiskey itself.
Absolutely. So we have all 3 styles of Irish whiskey, right? So it's grain whiskey, malt whiskey, and pot still whiskey. So grain whiskey, you know, before anything touches the wood, it usually brings kind of like a friendly fruit, or not fruity, but like sweetness, like a honey kind of sweetness. The malt brings a fruity sweetness, kind of like deep berries almost subtly. And then the pot still brings a spice, like a peppery spice and a creamy, oily mouthfeel. So before we do anything, we've got those 3 great styles already bringing a lot of complexity and like even bringing a complex mouthfeel right before it touches any barrels. So each of those whiskeys grows up in bourbon for 4 years. And after that, we then put the whiskeys separately into the different barrels. So the barrels are South African brandy, Australian tawny, which is like a port, Japanese Mizunara oak. We have bourbon, which you already mentioned, sherry from Spain, Colombian rum, and Caribbean rum. So 7 barrels total are touching this one whiskey. And the goal is not to have any barrel overpower the whiskey. The goal is for each sip to kind of take you on a journey. So, I mean, I know it sounds marketing, but it is kind of like a journey around the world. We're going to taste each of the flavors. You know, these barrels have been hand selected to showcase the flavors of their region. So we should be able to taste them at some point in each sip. So that's kind of the goal. That's like what we want. It results in, I think, an exceptionally friendly whiskey. Irish whiskey is the friendliest whiskey, I always say. It's friendly, it's approachable, it goes down easy, but it is full of character. And Lost Irish especially is just so complex. People go, whoa, like I need a second to process what's going on. And usually as they go back for different sips, they taste more. So if you want, we can taste it together.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think on the nose, for me, it really showcases the tawny, the Australian tawny and the South African brandy, because I think it's so fruity on the nose.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
just like, yeah, it's bright. Like we get like, you get like a bit of green apple,
Yeah.
pineapple, maybe pear, lots of orange, clementines.
Yeah, a little bit more citrus than like I always get green apple. Like it always seems
Mm,
to come through, but that there's definitely more citrus on this.
yeah. And it's just so light. I mean, even on the nose, you're almost like, is this gonna, is this, 80 proof? It's light,
Yeah,
I think, on the nose.
sure.
Um,
Yeah,
so you can go ahead and take a sip, your
all right.
first sip.
I know, right?
So I find each sip is quite different, the first and the second. But the first for me, the bourbon hits straight away, right on the tip of your tongue. You get, that oakiness, that vanilla. And then I think the rum hits the center of your tongue, and there's almost like a numbing sensation that's happening.
Mhm.
It's like a spice. There's kind of licorice, all sorts comes through a little bit. It's spicy. I feel like tropical fruits, but then there's this tingle on the back of your throat, and we're calling it like a
Yeah.
chili prickle heat. It just tickles.
Mm.
It's not a burn. It's a gentle tickle, and it lingers. We say that's from the Japanese Mizunara oak.
It really lingers. That's my one. Like, I feel like there's a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not gonna say a lot, but there are a number of, especially like an 80 proof, which again, there's a lot of Irish whiskeys at 80 proof that you're gonna get a nice flavor at when you sip it, but it's kind of gone. Like it doesn't really linger that long. This lingers way longer. Like
yeah.
this really sticks around.
The first thing I noticed about this whiskey, because I got to taste a version of it before like the
Mm.
barrels were finished, and I loved it. But then when I had the final, I was like talking 5 minutes after, like, having a sip, and it was still there. And I
Hmm.
was like, how is this whiskey still lingering? Like it's still lingering for me now.
Yeah,
Um,
there's there. I definitely get rum. Like
yeah,
there's a rum like component to that for sure.
yeah, it's like rummy raisin that sits there. I think there's like
Yeah.
an incredible mouthfeel that goes on.
Yes.
Yeah,
It. I
coats
don't
your
get
mouth.
I don't get the citrus as much on when I drink it as I do on the nose.
I completely agree. And what I want is for you to go back for your second sip now,
Mm.
because I do feel like the second sip is different. For me, the second sip makes me salivate. Like it's juicy. It's like saliva keeps being produced in my mouth.
Mm.
It's like really, really
More
juicy, whereas the
on the
first one was
sides.
spicy. Yeah.
Mm.
Do you get that?
Yeah. It sits on the sides a little bit more. The first one
Mm-hmm.
like sat on the back of my tongue.
Mm-hmm.
This one's like sitting on the sides a lot more. Like it's
So
definitely.
everything was taken into account when, creating this whiskey. Like it has to be something exceptional, which means not just a great taste, but like a great nose and a great mouthfeel and a great finish. The whole experience we want to be exceptional. Now, like Lost Irish is we're positioning ourselves, as kind of like the middle, bridging the gap between, let's say, Jameson, Tully Bushmills, and Redbreast and Green Spot, right? We're
Mhm.
approachable price wise. We're a 4-year-old whiskey with multiple levels of finishing, which we can talk about in a minute. But like, I think honestly, like it tastes very unique. It tastes very mature. And it could kind of sit on the shelf beside any of them. So that's obviously I'm biased, but I love it.
Are you a bourbon fan?
Yes.
Okay. So I feel like in bourbon, there are a lot of like we're gonna call them just standards. We'll say that. Like standard offerings, whether it's from a craft distillery or
Mm-hmm.
from a big name, monster conglomerate. And some are exceptionally good, especially for the price, and
Mm-hmm.
some are significantly worse, like not very good. And then there's a massive jump in like price point for you to get like an increased quality of bourbon, again, in my opinion. And again, you can find those in that like $30 range where they're good and you're going to be happy with them. And then there's other ones that are going to be really surprising, I think, in that $30 range. And
Right.
I think an Irish whiskey, I think the quote unquote like standard from a Jameson Tullamore Dew, Bushmills, I think they are better than just a standard like offering from Evan Williams, or it's one
Yeah.
of those personally.
Yeah.
And I
I
think, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I couldn't agree more. Like having worked for Tullamore Dew, the price point of Tullamore Dew Original
Mhm.
and the flavor, and how exceptional the liquid is just jaw dropping to me.
Mhm.
Like, and you compare it to other categories, I fully agree.
But when you start like having ones that are aged or finished or different ones, I feel like that step up in the Irish whiskey is, I feel like people who are limiting themselves to Jameson are not, because again, it is obviously the most popular Irish whiskey that's out there. It's been around, and it's sold tremendously worldwide
It's one of the most popular whiskeys in the world.
in any category.
Yeah.
And nobody in the Irish category is going to dethrone Jameson, but
Yeah.
like there is this really great space in Irish whiskey for others, and you're seeing other finishes and other um different proofs. Like I started to see more higher proof Irish
Mm-hmm.
whiskeys that I hadn't had before, that are really good. And it's just, I feel like there's such a different, like there's more steps to take in the Irish whiskey
Yes.
than even in bourbon.
Well, we have a little bit more lenience, right? Because we can use anything that's any type of wood, like for our whiskey. And like a lot of other whiskey categories have really strict rules.
Mhm.
Our like maturing and finishing rules are very lenient, which allows us to be exceptionally playful. And then let's remember, Irish whiskey has a third style of whiskey that's made nowhere else in the world, called pot still whiskey. And if you're familiar with Redbreast or Green Spot or Blue Spot, Red Spot, they're pot still whiskeys, and that is the signature style of whiskey made in Ireland. And I always think it's a funny story of how pot still was created. It was there was taxes put on from the English to the Irish on their exports, and the biggest export was whiskey. Irish whiskey was the most popular spirit in the world. It was being drank by everybody. So the English thought, well, let's profit off this. They had rule over Ireland, and they actually put the tax on the malted grain used
Mm.
in making Irish whiskey. So the Irish put their heads together and they go, how can we avoid this tax? So they decided to throw unmalted barley in with the malted barley, and kind of it was really just to kind of cut the taxes, not get taxed on the malted grain, and just see, does it still make something palatable?
Mhm.
And what actually happened was like a beautiful mistake. It ended up being pot still whiskey, which is a signature style of Irish whiskey that's known for its pepperiness, its spiciness. Like it can be like those spices can really change. It can be like a Christmassy spice, that goes through your mouth, but it's definitely something that's hot and spicy. And then that has this oily, creamy mouthfeel that just like coats your mouth. And one of my favorite Irish whiskeys is Green Spot, and has been
Mhm.
forever. So I absolutely adore pot still. So when you think about Irish whiskey as a base, you think about that standard offering, the one that's, not on the highest shelf. It's
Mhm.
already got so much more unique factors than other styles of whiskey.
Sure.
It's got more opportunities for different styles, so pot still, and then obviously more opportunities for the barrels. Now it still needs to be matured for at least 3 years, but you can really play around with what kind of wood you use. And that's what's making these really, really cool and fun and playful Irish whiskies that are definitely worth a try, I think.
That last sip I had, I think I got a little bit more like dark fruit. I don't know if that's from that tawny cask,
Yeah.
but that
Yeah.
I
You
don't know.
got the
Yeah.
tawny and the sherry could be bringing through those dark fruits. It's really interesting. Like there's also the raisin coming through
Hmm.
from the rum, which kind of might bring, or maybe like dates and plums come through from the rum as well. Um, I definitely think as you sip, another thing gets revealed, another thing gets revealed.
Yeah.
And that's what's really fun about it. But I mean, it's incredibly sippable. Would you
Yeah.
agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. You could sip on this very easily.
Yeah.
Um, it's yeah. I think that's where, again, this is going to be released on St. Patrick's Day, so people are going to be drinking Irish whiskey, but you want them to branch out a little bit, because there are, and again, I'm not trying to like talk about the other brands that are out there, but there are others, because people are so locked into like Jameson, and it's
Well,
natural, but we got like, people have to branch out a little bit and realize that there's other really good ones that are out there.
oh, and if you honestly, if you like Jameson, you are going to like everything else that's out there, because Irish whiskey, like I said, it's friendly. That's why
Yeah.
Jameson has done so exceptional. And like everybody in the Irish whiskey world is really grateful for Jameson, because they put Irish whiskey back in the front of the stage like it should be, where it belongs.
Mhm.
And it got a lot of new drinkers into the whiskey category, the Irish whiskey category. And then I do think, I mean, I drank Jameson first, and that was what
Yeah.
hooked me. And then, of course, I had access to all these exceptional whiskeys. And I started trying them and falling in love with them. So we're definitely really thankful for Jameson introducing people. But like you said, if you have the opportunity, if the price point is similar or only a small bit above, go ahead and try something new. Like there is so much happening in Irish whiskey right
Mhm.
now, which I mean, me and you know more than anybody, but it's like, I know you just had Clonakilty on, and
Yeah.
there's just so much incredible fun stuff happening. And I love everyone that I try, I genuinely enjoy. So it's not a risky category for sure.
And the expansion is happening like crazy, because everybody that I've talked to has mentioned like it wasn't really that long ago where there was only a handful of distilleries, and just Irish whiskey brands in general. Now there's, I forgot what the number that they said. I want to say it's 30 something, that
40.
40. So
Yeah.
it's blowing up, and there's really good stuff out there.
Yeah.
Um,
And that, the reason a lot of people think, Scotch has definitely got like a bit of prestige about it, and it became incredibly globally famous. But Irish whiskey was the most popular spirit in the world, and like, I mean, spirit total.
mhm,
Everybody was drinking Irish whiskey, and a few things led to its decline. So one thing was prohibition.
mhm.
The Americans stopped drinking. America is the biggest market in the world for Irish whiskey, so that took a huge hit. Ireland also got its independence from England. This is like I'm not great at dates, but like think early 1900s is when it all started to
Mhm.
decline, and Ireland got its independence over England, which is a great thing, except it resulted in a lot of trade wars, because England was exporting a lot of products, and so they started to prioritize Scotch. And the third thing is like a typical Irish thing. There was a man named Aeneas Coffey, and he created the coffee
Good
still,
still.
or the column still, yeah. And he was actually a tax man in Ireland, and he was taxing whiskey makers. So he wasn't looked upon very fondly. And he came up with this equipment that actually made exceptional whiskey, very fast, very high quality. Um, and he brought it to the Irish, and they said, get out of here. And he brought it to the Scottish, and they said, yeah, this is exceptional. So
Mm.
they started to be able to make quality product faster than the Irish, which also gave them a little bit of a foot up on top of those other things. Um, so Irish whiskey started to decline fast. There was hundreds of distilleries, and then it went down to three.
Mm.
And it was really a great thing that Irish distillers got together and they kept all of the brands alive. But really making the liquid out of three different distilleries. But
Mm.
all the heritage brands were still here. They just weren't very popular for a long time. And then it just got a resurgence, and it has been the fastest growing spirit category in the world for 10 years.
It's crazy.
And they say that by 2030, all the um like whiskey advocate and everything have projected that Irish whiskey is going to overtake Scotch globally, Scotch sales.
I think it
So
should. I don't like Scotch. That's just me personally. But yeah, it's interesting starting to see, having peated Irish whiskeys,
yeah,
the different casks that are being used for finishing. It definitely makes it unique. It definitely changes. I think, again, I go back to like the different bottles that are out there that you can buy, and there's a very, very good like base level of Irish whiskey. And I think your projection was perfect. Like you have your green spots. I forgot what else you put up there, but
Red
it was like the
breast.
red breast, and then like that middle ground, like that's a great
Mhm.
stepping stone.
Mhm.
Because again, you get into like the red breast, you can go down a rabbit hole with some of those as well.
Yeah.
Tealings, like you can go down a rabbit hole with some of what they have, and there
Yeah.
has to be something in between. And I think this is a
Yeah.
great step up from a standard. Again, like we both love Tullamore Dew, but this is
Mhm.
a step up from your standard Tullamore Dew.
Yeah, 100%. And it's ready to try something different. And to be honest, this really is different.
Mhm.
We get asked sometimes, what do you compare it to? Because it's a great way to, teach sales reps and stuff how to sell it. What could you compare it to? And they like to have two things, they say it's kind of like this or kind of like this.
Mhm.
Um, we don't have that. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know what to compare it to. It's really different. It's really unique. I think it's still distinctively Irish, which is very important. It's still Irish whiskey, but this global influence brings something new to the table. And it's kind of exciting. It's contemporary. It's a modern take on Irish whiskey. And I hope that everybody enjoys it and everybody gets to give it a go, especially, around Paddy's Day.
Mhm.
So to give you a bit of context of where it is, we actually launched now in California, New York, Texas, Illinois, and Florida.
I'm excited about the Florida thing since I'm heading down there in a week. So
Yes, you're gonna see it.
it's
There's
exciting.
bars near you that are gonna have it actually.
Tell me, okay, I'm curious. Tell me a little bit more about just like the process of making, because you mentioned like the three styles that are in there, right? So you've got your
Yeah.
pot still, malt, grain. So is that something where you have the three of them obviously made separately,
Mhm.
those blended, and then they head to the different casks, or are they individually in other casks? What is that process like?
So it's individually, we don't blend it until
Okay.
the end of the whole process. So
Ah.
the reason being, if you blended it, and let's say you put the blend into the tawny cask,
Mhm.
and then you just leave it a little bit too long, you've ruined your liquid. So what we try to do, or what we do, sorry, is we have the grain malt and pot still. It's all matured in bourbon casks. And then we separately it's mostly the malt actually goes
Mhm.
into each of the finishing casks. So it sits in them for different amounts of times. So it's all separately in there and waiting to be blended until each cask has given what it needs to the liquid. So for instance, the Japanese Mizunara oak, that actually the malt sits in that barrel for 14 months.
Oh wow.
But the tawny is more like 3 to 4 months. Because think about it, port is such an influential, like you can already imagine the wood influencing the liquid so fast,
Make it
whereas it takes a
overwhelming.
lot longer for the Japanese Mizunara oak. So the blender is constantly, the distiller and the blender are constantly checking it and seeing like, is it ready? Is it ready? Is it ready? And then when it finally gets to kind of where the finish they want it to be, then they sat. So this is all for the first batch, right? So we've got our first batch out in the world now, and they had to sit down and decide what was Lost Irish going to taste like. So they had lots of different iterations. Maybe they had 10% of the sherry cask influence in the mix, and they had 5% of the South African brandy, but they had 15% of the Colombian rum finish portion in there. And then they would taste that and be like, can I taste everything? And
Mhm.
that was the important thing. Can we taste everything? So they went through each kind of variety, tried different balances, different percentages, and then started to think, okay, do I like the nose? How can we make the nose better? Well, I love what the South African brandy brings to the nose.
Mhm.
However, if you add more South African brandy finish, you know what I mean? I'm saying South African brandy, meaning the whiskey that was in the South African
Yeah.
brandy barrel. If you add more of that, you have to reduce some of something else. So what are we going to take out if we
Mhm.
add another percent, we've got to take 1% of something out. So it was very complex. And I was lucky enough to actually taste each portion separately as they were making the final blend. So I got to taste like, okay, what does the Caribbean rum finish bring? And then Tim would say, what do you like about this? And I would go, I like the way my tongue feels.
Mhm.
you know, and he'd go, okay, that's kind of what we want to pull from this one. Or I'd be like, I love the finish of this one. And so I got to taste each component, and like they were wildly different,
I bet.
wildly different. And then finally, and by the way, some on their own, incredible. Like you almost are like, I want it to taste like this.
Yeah.
But some were great, but you might want to sip on them all day. And so then coming to the final blend was I mean, I can't imagine what the process would have been like for Tim and Neil. Probably a nightmare. But I know that he told me the final two, he was in between one that had a little bit of, it packed a bit of a punch.
Mhm.
It still had all the flavor and everything, but it had a little bit more of like a hit. And he goes, I knew like whiskey nerds would just like love this whiskey, they would like
Sure.
be able to pull it apart. And his option too was this one. And he chose this one because he was like, I want a whiskey that people want to have another one of,
I
you
just
know?
did.
Yeah, I seen you.
I just got a huge hit of pear, by the way. Um,
Oh, I
and
love it.
so would it be like, I'm curious how much it would change the blend if you were to change the, like, for example, you've got the, like the malt. If you finish that in like the Caribbean rum
Mhm.
cask versus a different one, you know what I mean? Like if you switch, I just wonder how each of them would react to a finishing in like one of the different barrels.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of now, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think that the malt whiskey is known to be the best one for finishing. And I
Mm,
wish I had a good reason why, because there is a good reason why. But that's why they chose the malt to go into almost all the finishing casks.
okay.
So the pot still and the grain was in bourbon, right? But the malt was in bourbon, and then it was in all the other barrels. So you can imagine there's a higher proportion of malt in this blend than grain and pot still. Um, but yeah, it's really interesting. It's really complex. Sometimes it can get a bit like mind-boggling, the finishing process. But I think they achieved what they wanted, which was to be able to taste each barrel
Mm,
or experience each barrel
yeah.
when you sip on the whiskey, at
You're
least.
certainly getting different components of the flavor. Like it's very layered. It's not, it's not like, again, some where you take the sip and the second sip is exactly the same. Like
Yeah.
it's no fun.
Yeah.
It's a very nice, like very light, nice sipping whiskey that you could have more than one of.
Yes.
And again, like continue to have different flavors that you get out of it, and not just kind of be pummeled by the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. And I just think it's complex, it's interesting, but it's
Mhm.
still bright, approachable.
Very approachable.
I kind of don't like we were talking before we got on this about
Mhm.
Tullamore Dew 12 and how much we both love it.
Yeah.
Um, but it's like Tullamore Dew 12 is kind of like my special occasion, or like it's kind of like that moment, like when you get all cozy in the house and you're like, I kind of want like something to warm me up.
Mhm.
Lost Irish, like I don't think needs a special occasion. Like it works anytime you feel like you fancy a little whiskey. Like it can be after dinner, but it can also be, a happy hour.
Mhm.
I just think it's just so friendly. It's so light and bright, and it's just different. And I really enjoy drinking it, which is good because
Yeah.
that's a big part of my job. But we've got incredible feedback so far. And I love getting feedback because remember, for a year, I didn't have anything to show for this
Sure.
brand.
Yeah.
So it's really exciting to hear what bartenders think, what whiskey drinkers think, and even people who don't drink whiskey think. That's actually, because I've had a lot of people that go, "Oh, I'm not really a whiskey drinker," and I go, "Yeah, okay, no worries. Like, but you just try a little bit if you want." And they go, "Oh, I like this way more
Oh,
than I thought I was going to." So
and I
love that.
think I think because we've done some blind tastings of different Irish whiskeys, and the ones that are like heavily finished, and like some of them are very hit or miss, and some people are going to like them, some people aren't. So I think you get like this, it offers a variety of flavors that you're going to pull out of it, versus some that you're going to get like one flavor that just kind of hits you and it's there and it's like
Mhm.
it never really changes.
Yeah.
And so I think this offers like that variety that, I mean, people would really enjoy. And like you said, you could have it if you're a brand new Irish whiskey drinker, or, if you've had others, if you've tried some, like you said, the red breast or the green spots or any of those, like, I think this is a great place for like to fit in with any of those.
Yeah, 100%. It's different, but it's friendly. It's not a cask strength, like
Mhm.
I have some really cool different Irish whiskeys on my shelf that I'm really excited that I have. Like I've got Blue Spot there. I like love what I have to offer, but do I grab them all the time? Not really, right?
Can't.
Yeah,
No,
right.
yeah, that's yes, we've been there where it's like, okay, I want
Yeah.
something. I'm not going to grab Blue Spot because I feel like having a sip of whiskey. Like that doesn't make
Yeah,
any sense.
exactly. It's
What is
more
the
like, hey, you guys want to have a Blue Spot because
yeah,
we're watching the Super Bowl, or like, you know what I mean?
exactly.
Yeah.
What is this retail for?
So it's recommended retail is about $40.
Okay.
So it can you might see it for $1 more, $1 less.
Yep.
Like that's kind of what we're recommending. And we're seeing different prices in different states, but
Sure.
right around that number.
Now I understand that it's just getting going, but is there, and if you can't, that's fine. But what's the future look like? What is next? What happens from here? Obviously, it's been a long process of getting it out and getting on the shelves and getting it to people after promoting it as hard as you guys did, despite some of the challenges you were faced with. So what's next for Lost Irish?
So we get asked this a lot.
Hmm.
There is obviously a lot of potential when you look at the
Hmm.
brand of the different things that you could do. However, it is our number one priority to have people fall in love with this Lost Irish, right? We want them to know what to expect when they order a Lost Irish, to be excited about the flavors, to get it to as many uh, people as possible and have them tasting it around the world before we release anything different.
Hmm.
We learned a lot in working in Irish whiskey that like it is so fun to be playful,
Hmm.
and customers get really really excited about different SKUs and different options, especially if they have a brand that they love and they want to see the 12-year-old or the cask strength or whatever. But the number one thing for a brand to be successful is to have its flagship, its
Hmm.
original, be known everywhere and loved. So that is our number one priority. Now, we do have ideas for small releases that we could do in the future, like in a few years future,
Hmm.
of maybe small releases of like specialty finishes, because think of what we have to play with, right? We have
Yeah.
the world, right?
Yeah.
So like
Literally.
you could choose a part of the world and focus on the barrels of that part of the world, and
Hmm.
showcase a country or showcase a continent with Lost Irish. So I think like I don't want to like, we don't have um names made or finishes planned, but I think we are all aware that there is a lot of avenues that we could take that could
Definitely.
be really fun.
Yeah, I'll do it after recording. But yes, I can definitely see that because that's the potential is certainly there. But I agree. Like, I feel like there's nothing wrong with focusing on expansion in terms of getting it to new states. Cause I know I'm sure it's a hassle to get into new states. There's different regulations everywhere you go.
Yeah.
But getting it out to people, like have people try this, because I'm sure there have been plenty of people or brands who have gotten themselves going and then kind of can get ahead of themselves going, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
And I can see
And
where
I
that's like, it's a
I
good
think
idea.
like
Let's get
as
it out there.
yeah, 100%. And like as a bartender, what I've seen is like I want to make sure that I have this brand on the shelf. So if I introduced it to my customer and they come back in 3 months and ask me for it again, like
Mhm.
that brand is still on the shelf, or it's not now, got like there's the single grain and there's the blend and there's the sherry finish. And it just kind of all gets a little bit overwhelming. You know, we're talking about consumers kind of needing to educate themselves, learn a little bit more about Irish whiskey and start by dabbling, you know,
Mhm.
trying something different, maybe being introduced to it by a friend, a bartender, or going to the liquor store and buying something different. So like, we don't want to overwhelm them. We want Lost Irish to be able to stand on its own and be like, this is our whiskey, you know, and we are really proud of it, and we want to introduce it to different states. We're launching it in Ireland in April.
Oh,
So it's going to be introduced in multiple countries then in across Europe this year, and different states will probably open up later in the year. We just opened Florida last week. So there's a lot to do with this one SKU rather
yeah.
than me, you know, coming at them with loads of different ones. So I
Sure.
think it's all about Lost Irish. Take one.
I think it's awesome. And I think what's cool too is, again, like if people haven't had it and like they look at the bottle and they see Irish right on top of it, like right in the front, like they're going to be more likely to want to give that a try. I mean, again, I'm not saying it's a intentional thing, but if I'm sitting in a bar and I want Irish whiskey and I see like the word Irish, like I'm not
Yeah.
looking around, because there's some that if you're sitting across the bar, like you might not know it's an Irish whiskey, and probably less likely to try it out. Like I feel like there's a good reason that people would want to at least ask about it and have a bartender say, yeah, this is a new one we got, like try it out. And I think it's pretty good way to get people to try it out.
Yeah, I think the name signifies so much about our culture and stuff and about the story of the liquid. But I also think when you see that name on the bottle and the way that they have made that bottle with the embossing and the way that Lost Irish stands out, when you see that on a shelf in a bar, you really see it. And like obviously it's the first thing I'm looking for when I go into a bar, but I think it stands out. I think there's going to be customers who, you know, there's a lot of Irish whiskeys that are difficult to say, you know, for American consumers. The name can be a little bit intimidating, or the label is kind of busy or hard to see in a dark bar. I think I'm really, really proud of how they ended up with the bottle, because I think it's very visible. It's very easy to say, it's eye catching, and it kind of tells you what it is in 2 words,
Yeah,
you know?
definitely. I totally agree. You don't want to be looking across the bar and try to figure out what something is and go, oh, let me try that obscure one that I can't even recognize. Like this, very straightforward. And it's a beautiful bottle. The shape is awesome. Like I love how Lost Irish like in the bottle.
Mhm.
And it looks really cool. I think people are going to dig it.
Thank you. Yeah, we're so excited. And like as we lead into Paddy's Day now, you know, it's like this is the time of year that people are most interested in Irish
Mhm.
whiskey. So we're getting a lot more interest and people willing to talk about Irish whiskey. 'Tis the season, you know.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'll definitely make sure that week I get some pictures posted, since now I know it's available in Florida. So it works out
Oh
perfectly.
yes, yeah, definitely. I'm gonna text you where near where you're staying
Okay.
definitely has it. And I think over the 6 weeks of you being in Florida, you're probably going to see it pop up more
I
because it
bet.
just launched last week. So we're very, very excited about it.
That's so great. Is there any, did I forget anything? Is there anything else I need to make sure gets covered? Because I got to make sure it's, everyone gets the information that's needed about the
I think
brand.
I think we covered an absolute ton.
Yeah,
And if there's anything we forgot, it only gives us an opportunity to jump back on another time.
exactly. Drink more, more Lost Irish.
Right?
What's a good place? Where can people find you guys? Like social media, find yourself, anything like that?
Yes, please. So Lost Irish Whiskey at Lost Irish Whiskey on Instagram. Please give us a follow. We are really announcing everything got to do with the brand there on Instagram. Like if it's going to be coming in your state, if you want to find out where to buy it nearby, everything kind of goes through Lost Irish Whiskey. We also have a website, lostirish.com. But if you stay tuned to the social media, it's much more exciting. And if you want to follow me on social media, especially if you are in California, I am up and down the state selling Lost Irish. If there's any bar owners or anybody who's interested in trying it, my Instagram is at Lost with Donna. So don't hesitate to follow me and hit me up if you're interested in Lost Irish. But yeah, I appreciate the interest. I appreciate
Definitely.
everybody checking it out. And I'm so happy to have come on with you today. And I'm even more delighted that you like it.
Definitely. I appreciate it. I'm so excited I got to finally try it. Yeah, I was definitely looking forward to this. So but the knock at my door when it was delivered was definitely a happy
Yay.
day. But sitting there waiting for it was not. So I was
Right.
excited to finally try it out. So awesome.
Well, happy St. Patrick's Day.
Yes. Thank you. You too. Thank you very
Enjoy it.
much.
Enjoy some Irish whiskey for me, and I'll have some for you.
Perfect. Even better. Awesome. Thanks, Donna.
Cheers.